This back is much harder than the top. The grain is different in different areas. And it changes. There's a lot of cross grain. I'm getting ready to glue on my top. Got my double boiler rigged up here. A little water in that. And I've got this stuff. Hide glue. Mix it with warm water. It's the same stuff Stradivari used. And I got my clamps here already. Got my rib frame ready to go. And there's the top, all final sanded inside with 400 grit paper. So I'm ready to put this top on. And I got my little, I put a little hello sign inside my instruments. Just so if someday someone will look in there and I can wish them a little hello from maybe beyond the grave. There's a little story behind it. I'll get into it later. All the clamps are on now. The top is on. Okay, I'm ready to put the back on. Got my name tag in. Yeah, and everything's all smoothed out inside. And so I'm going to tell you the story of this little guy. You can see he's upside down here. And the inspiration for this is a guy named Crazy Danny. Back in 1998, when my partner in the instrument business, Steve Colby, rented a house with a garage out in the Oxnard Dunes. Our instrument shop had been in the loft above the boatyard where we both worked. And there was the landlord lived on one side. His name was Jules. I'm not making this up. That was his name. That's what we all called him, was Jules. And on the other side, what side the garage was on, there lived a guy that Jules called Crazy Danny. And they were in constant war with each other. They just had this tremendous personality clash. And Danny had built a 6-foot high fence, like a stockade, along his side of the property. And Jules said, don't talk to him at all. He's totally crazy. And they were always calling the cops on each other. Danny'd play his music really loud until Jules would call the cops, and then he'd complain against him, so these guys were constantly going battle. So Steve and I decided, we're not going to get involved in this. We're here to build instruments and to play music. We're not going to get involved in their little petty wars. So I decided I was going to make friends with Danny. Because I'm maybe a little on the crazy side myself, and I kind of understand crazy people. Like, he wouldn't do this stuff if he wasn't a little bit nuts. So anyway, Danny was, one night Danny had the music turned way up. He was just trying to drive Jules over the edge. And Bob Dylan, he's playing Bob Dylan. Well, I'm a child of the 60s. I love Bob Dylan. I play some of his songs. So Times They Are Changin' came on, and I play that. So I took my Violin, my little homemade guitar mandolin hybrid, and I was sitting outside the shop, and I was jamming along with Dylan and just singing at the top of my voice. And I see this head stick up over the fence with this crazy hair going. I looked at him and I said, gotta love Dylan. And so Danny and I became friends from then on. He didn't come into the shop much because it was on the side where Jules was, but a couple of times we snuck him in. And he turned out to be a really pretty cool guy. So this is just, that inspired me. This is what I saw when he stuck his head over the fence. And this is someday, maybe hundreds of years after I'm dead, somebody will find this fiddle in the back of a junk shop or an antique shop and decide to restore it, and the first thing that you do is look inside. You can look at the linings through one sound hole here, and you can look at the bass bar through the sound hole on this side. And then you pull the end pin out and you look inside, and you can see the ribs and the linings and the end block where the neck fastens on. So if somebody looks in there, they're going to get a hello from beyond the grave from me and Crazy Danny. It's just humor down through the centuries, if you will. So that's the story of that. Now I'm going to put the back on this thing. Well, it's March 11th, and we just had one heck of a snow. Well, now that the body's assembled, I have to refine my edges here. I've left them a little long so I can shape them to the rib frame. So the edge overhang, I'm going to trim that down first. Edge overhang is supposed to be 3 millimeters. So what I have is a washer here. It's about 3 millimeters. So I'm going to use that. Go around here with a line 3 millimeters out from the rib. And then I'll be cutting the height down. I'll have to look in the book to that and see what that is. So then I'll be refining the edges here, rounding them off, and then dishing this out up to a line. It's not just rounded over. It goes out. It meets the curve here and the curve here meet at a line that refines the edge. And that's just one of those things that makes a fiddle really nice. And if they don't have it, they just don't look right. What I'm doing now is taking the thickness of the edges down. What I'm looking for is the middle here, 4.5 millimeters, and the corners 4.5 millimeters, and everything else 4 millimeters. And this back here, the end button is 4.5 millimeters. And nice edges are one of the defining things about a fiddle, and how you are as a fiddle builder is how you treat the edges. You want a nice edge. When I get this down to the right thickness, then I'll be rounding it over. Rounding these over, but then I'm going to come back with my curved scraper and take this dished part here right out to a line. So there'll be a line of demarcation between the rounded over the edge and the dished out. It won't be just rounded over. It'll meet on a line. And that's the one of the ways how your skills as a violin maker is judged, is how you handle the hard stuff. And the little subtle things that what make a really nice violin, the way you handle the edges, and the way you do the scroll, which is a hard thing to do, and the F-holes, all the stuff that's hard to do. How you handle that is how you'll be judged, how I'll be judged, long after I'm gone. So I'm going to do the best I can. That's all we can do. And mainly I just hope it sounds good. I'm starting my edge rounding procedure. Got a very sharp blade. I'm going to carve 45-degree angle. Got the ribs wrapped with tape so I won't scar them up while I'm doing this initial. So I'm going to start off carving a 45-degree angle about halfway so that this distance and the width are about the same. Got to be very careful with the grain. Take very little shavings. If it starts digging in, I got to go the other way. Got to go slow with this stuff. You try to go too fast, you're going to take too much off. You can always take more off, but it's really hard to put it back on. Now down here I'm going to have to change and start going this way. Not yet. You can tell when it starts digging in. And then I can refine it a little bit with my scraper. Smooth it out some. And of course, good old sandpaper. I use to blend the edges in, make it round. And as I'm doing the other edge too, I'll round this over, but no more. When I cut my 45, I'll stop at the outer edge of the 45. And then I'll leave that until I start blending this dished out area into the rounded over area. And then I can take this down a little thinner here. If I think the overhang's too much, I'll take it in and just go by eye looking at it and see if it looks like about the right overhang, and you'll gradually start looking like how the edges of a violin should look. Then when I start going with the finer grits of paper, I'll take the tape off and sand everything evenly. What I'm doing now is rubbing out the varnish coats. This is actually the next to the last coat of clear varnish. And I'm using 6,000 grit. 6,000 grit micro mesh. And I'm getting ready to put my last clear coat on this. Rub it out between varnish coats with the micro mesh. So she's just about finished varnish. And what I did when I sanded it down the last time, I just slightly raised the grain with water. And then I didn't sand it down. I rubbed it out with some 2400 micro mesh. And I used on a golden brown water-based stain, which also raised the grain slightly, but it gave it a, that's my ground color. So I wanted a golden brown. And then I rubbed that out with 2400 micro mesh, and then went over it with a pore filler and sealer. Keep the varnish from penetrating the wood. And then 2 coats of yellow varnish for my base color to so I want kind of golden overtones on it, so 2 coats of yellow varnish rubbed out in between coats with 3600 and 3200 I think micro mesh. And then I've got 4 coats of golden brown varnish on it, rubbed out in between coats with the 3600 micro mesh. And I added another, there's actually 5 coats on the top because the top was pretty light, so I added another coat of golden brown on the spruce top. And then the last coat I rubbed out with 4,000 micro mesh. And then this is the first coat of clear. I rubbed it out with 6,000. I've got these little pads too for doing the top. Just to level it and even it out, take out any little bubbles, imperfections. Now I've got one more coat of clear that's going on it, and I'm going to leave it set for a week. And then I'll rub it out with the rubbing compound. I have a real fine liquid rubbing compound that I'll just work that down till it's nice and smooth and level, and then she'll be ready to string up. So that's pretty exciting stuff. And I've got a rosewood chin rest, Garneria style, goes over the end block. I like that because it's actually clamping down where the end block is. And then I've got my tailpiece with a fine tuner ebony with a gold cleft in there. And I got my pegs and my bridge and a set of strings, so I'm just about ready to finish this violin. Well, the varnishing is complete. Got my fingerboard hollowed out, so that's ready to go on, and I'm fitting the pegs. I have my reamer here. I ream the tapered holes in the scroll. Now I'm taking the pegs down. I've got a peg shaper. It's kind of like a pencil sharpener. It's set on the angle, and I put the pegs in and turn them and crank it down, and it gradually shapes the pegs till they'll fit in those holes the way that I want them. So then we'll start fitting her up. Well, I got my pegs fitted and the fingerboard is glued on. The peg's slightly angled in so that the tension of the string tends to keep them in the holes, the tapered holes. And the fingerboard is hollowed and just glued lightly on the edges, because that's removable in case I have to do any work on it. And the bone nut is now on. And I mixed up some hide glue, hot hide glue. So now I gotta start fitting the bridge, and pretty soon this thing will be up and playing. Well, the pegs are all fitted now. Fingerboard and the nut is on. I've got the initial grooves filed for the strings. My bridge is made. I have my templates here for making the bridge. It has the marked for the grooves, and I have one here for the string spacing at the nut for violin and viola. So this is pretty exciting because I'm ready to put the strings on and hear it make its first sounds. Yeah, I've got all the strings on, but they don't have any tension on them, so it hasn't made any sound yet. So just trying to lay down. I can see some of these strings are going to be high, so I'm going to have to work on So far it sounds pretty good. Looks like a violin. She's all strung up now. See if she comes up to tune without busting apart. So far so good. I had a heck of a time getting that sound post. There's a post right under here. Boy, I had a heck of a time getting it. It kept falling over. I had to fish it out. I think I got it in about the right place. So.